Just so you know, this analysis was prepared under the scientific supervision of Professor Vihar Kiskinov. Now, we hear a lot about how high-risk AI systems are built and tested before they're released into the wild. But what happens the day after? When it's out there, learning and evolving, how do we make sure it stays safe and fair, not just for a week, but for years? That's the really crucial question we're going to dig into.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the hidden life of an AI system after it's launched. Then, we'll dive into the EU's specific answer to this problem and see how their monitoring plan actually works. After that, we'll figure out who's responsible for what. It's a whole chain of people and organizations. And finally, we'll zoom out and see why this EU approach could become the gold standard for the whole world.
Okay, so let's start with that big question. What actually happens after an AI goes live? It's so easy to think of the launch day as the finish line, right? But for a system that's designed to learn and adopt from its interactions with the real world, well, that's really just the beginning of the story.
And this right here is the core challenge. You see, a high-risk AI isn't like a bridge or a building. It's not a static, finished product. It's a dynamic system. It gets updated, it gets retrained on new data, it's constantly interacting with our messy, unpredictable world, and all of that means its behavior can change. Think about it. A hiring AI that seemed perfectly fair in a controlled test could, once it's out in the real world, start developing biases no one saw coming. What works in the lab doesn't always work out in the wild.
So what's the solution? Well, it's a concept called post-market monitoring. And the best way to get your head around it is to think about cars. A car gets tested like crazy before it ever hits the showroom floor, right? But the safety checks don't end there. Automakers are constantly tracking performance, looking for unexpected problems. And when they find one, they issue a recall. Post-market monitoring for AI? It's pretty much the exact same idea. It's an ongoing safety check that lasts for the entire life of the system.
Okay, so that's the concept, but how do you turn a good idea like that into actual law? Well, that brings us to the EU's big move. Their answer is written right into a super important part of their Landwork AI Act, Article 72. And look, a rule this important doesn't just appear overnight. It was hammered out over years of debate and refinement. The whole idea was first put on the table by the European Commission back in 2021. Then, for the next couple of years, the EU Council got involved, fine-tuning the details, making sure things like data protection were handled right, and that the rules would actually work in the real world. Finally, in 2024, they struck a deal, a compromise, that gives us strong oversight without being impossible to implement.
So, what does one of these monitoring plans actually look like? Let's get into the nuts and bolts of how this living regulation is supposed to work, how it's built to adapt and respond to what an AI is really doing out in the world. The whole thing is built around a continuous feedback loop. It's a cycle. Step 1, collect data. The AI provider has to actively gather information on how the system is doing from all kinds of sources, system logs, the companies using it, even from end users. Step 2, analyze that data. They have to look at it and ask, has anything changed? Is a risk we thought was just theoretical now a real problem? Step 3, take action. Based on that analysis, they have to do something. It might be a simple software patch, a bigger update, or if things are serious enough, they might have to pull the system from the market entirely. And step 4, document everything. Every change, every action has to be formally recorded so there's a clear paper trail. And then, the whole cycle just starts over again.
Now, the key here is that this isn't just a casual, we'll keep an eye on it kind of thing. No way. The AI Act makes it a legal requirement. Every single provider of a high-risk AI system has to create a formal, written-down post-market monitoring plan. Think of it as a detailed instruction manual. It has to spell out exactly how they'll collect and analyze data, what specific metrics, they call them key performance indicators or KPIs, they'll use to measure risk, who's responsible for each task, and what the step-by-step process is for dealing with problems when they pop up.
But here's the thing. A system like this can't just be one company's job. It wouldn't work. So the AI Act creates what you can think of as a chain of responsibility. It's a team effort, an ecosystem, where a bunch of different players each have a critical part to play in keeping things safe.
At the very heart of it all is the provider, the company that actually built the AI. They're the architects of this whole safety system. The buck stops with them. They have the main legal responsibility for designing the plan, documenting it, and making sure it's actually running day in and day out.
Okay, next up in the chain is the deployer.
This is the hospital using an AI for diagnostics, or the bank using it for loan applications. They are the reporters on the ground, the eyes and ears of the system. They see how the AI behaves in the real world every single day, and they have a legal duty to watch it and report anything that looks risky or any serious problems back to the provider. They're the source of that crucial real-world data.
Then, of course, you have the regulator. They're the watchdog. We're talking about the national government agencies in each EU country. They have the power to come in and check up on things. They can audit a provider's plan, investigate the AI system itself, and if a company isn't doing what it's supposed to, they can enforce the law.
And finally, there's the most important link in the chain, the user. That's you and me. We're not just passive bystanders in this. The Act actually gives you a voice. You have the legal right to file a complaint about a high-risk AI. And this is huge. If an AI makes a decision that has a big impact on your life, you have the right to an explanation. This brings everyone into the loop and makes accountability a reality.
So this whole framework is a big deal for Europe, obviously, but its impact doesn't stop there. What the EU is doing here has the potential to become the blueprint for how we govern AI all over the world. Let's see how. If you put the EU's approach next to what's developing in places like the United States, you see a really interesting difference in philosophy. The EU model is all about provider-led, continuous monitoring. The responsibility is squarely on the company that made the AI to keep tracking it, forever. In contrast, a lot of the ideas in the US are more focused on government oversight and what you might call transparency snapshots, basically making developers show their homework, revealing what data they used to train the model. So, to put it simply, the EU is focused on how the AI behaves after it's born, while the US is more focused on its origins. There's a great quote from the source material that just nails this philosophy. It says the framework is designed to, quote, ingest a diverse stream of information that reflects the system's true behavior, preventing a disconnect between theoretical compliance and actual performance, end quote. I mean, what does that really mean? It means the goal is to make sure an AI safety record is based on what it actually does in the real world, not just on promises someone made in a lab before it was ever released. All right, so let's boil this all down. What are the big takeaways here? First, post-market monitoring is not a one-and-done test. It's an ongoing safety check for the life of the AI. Second, it's all about that continuous feedback loop. Get data, analyze it, and then act on it. Third, this only works because it's a team sport, a shared responsibility between the makers, the users, and the regulators. And finally, this whole idea of a living regulation could very well be the global standard for making AI trustworthy. So, in the end, the AI Act creates a required, lifelong health checkup for any high-risk AI. The system has to generate its own health reports, which is great. But that leaves us with one massive, lingering question. Who are going to be the expert doctors who can actually read these reports? Who has the deep technical skill to diagnose the subtle problems and make sure the fixes are actually working? Because honestly, the success of this entire groundbreaking law might just hinge on finding the answer to that.